The Jill and Stacy Show with Jacob Saltzman.
The agenda for the meeting, so I just want to work through some information with you and have some conversation, some questions and answers, and continue to plan ahead for the upcoming legislative session. So the first thing I have on our agenda is just the legislative roundtable. We had an event with 4 of our local legislators attended with our school board and myself, and we had some conversation about a variety of some different topics and some good conversation. And essentially had some progress on continuing relationships with our local legislators, having that type of relationship where we can talk about issues, and we don't always agree on things, but we make sure we understand where everyone is on issues. So we had some good steps within that process. I also do want to mention I've been reaching out. I've reached out already to Representative Rawlings, and we've got a visit where we're going to go visit one of our schools and start working further that understanding of the school system, how things work, and just learning together, but also just keeping developing the relationship between one of our local legislators and our school system. I think that's incredibly important that we do that. Thanks.
How long has Steve been in his position?
Not even a year.
Okay, so not even a year. Turner's been in the position for 4 years, but throughout this school year, we're in December now. Turner reached out to Steve the day of this meeting. That morning, he had reached out to Steve so he could tell everybody he had reached out to him. And he's been in office since January, and Mr. Turner has not reached out to him until he needs something from him. So I think everybody needs to understand that. I don't want people to think that Matt Turner has been trying to work with our legislators, since they got in office. The only thing he's done is allow his school board members to sit up on the school board and take jab shots at them.
Had contact with a couple other people here since our last meeting. Had a long conversation with Brent Cooper, the Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce president, and we were talking about legislative priorities. He was sharing what their priorities are as the Chamber of Commerce of Northern Kentucky, and a couple of their priorities coincide with ours, align with ours. One, for example, that's very high on their list is the investing in early childhood education. They see that as a workforce development issue. Good quality early childhood education, kindergarten, preschool, will keep jobs in our region, will attract people to come to our region if we have those things in place. And of course, from our perspective as a school district, we have that perspective about the education of students. If you can get them at a younger age, you can make a lot of progress with students and their learning at the preschool level, at the kindergarten level, and we've certainly seen that at the full day kindergarten level with our students over the last 2 years now. And so that's one big topic for us to be discussing on early childhood education. And on our list there is codifying, putting in law the full day kindergarten. You may not be aware, but in the law it states that the state of Kentucky will fund half-day kindergarten. And obviously, we would prefer that to be fully funded so we can make sure that we can offer that. And that would be one of the things that if funding for that is put into place, we can then use the funding that we're having to put towards the other half of full day kindergarten into appropriately compensating our employees, trying to continue to make sure that we can pay our employees what is best in the market and what we can do to retain people and recruit people into our school district. So that was I just wanted to mention that conversation with the Chamber of Commerce. Also had some conversations with the Northern Kentucky Education Council. We was meeting with some of the representatives and also one of the local banks and talking about some points of advocacy and supporting for our school district. KASA has been sending out some information, and they'll continue to do that over a period of time. The Kentucky Association of School Administrators. Jenny, I know you're closely connected with that group. Have you gotten anything new from them here lately?
No, pretty much just the toolkit focused on the coalition work, which is the same priorities: teacher retention, increasing teacher salaries, that kind of thing.
Okay. So that's just a quick rundown on a few things from our last meeting. On this agenda, what I wanted to walk through was a couple of things that you have in your folder, but a couple of resources that are online as well. So if you would, you're going to have in your folder there a list of the legislative sessions. So we just take a quick walk through this. And I'll show you where you can access all this information on the LRC website.
Exactly where he came up with this list. So he has a committee. That's where this meeting is coming from, the legislative committee that he has put together. So 2 school board members, district office. We'll hear several of them talk throughout. The principal from Ignite. Where did we hear where he got all of his ideas from?
The Chamber of Commerce.
Right. Right. The president of the Chamber of Commerce, which just so you know, he sits on the board. Matt Turner does. He's a board member of the Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. I think there's 2 superintendents, Kenton County and Boone County, that sit on that. And the rest of them were
The Education Council, which Randy Post sits on that, who is on our state school board, who used to be our superintendent.
right. And so this committee had nothing to do with that. I bring that up because that's how things work in our district. The office of Matt Turner gives all the ideas to these boards, and then we push them out to the community like they were done by these committees. And the committees have no say in them. You know, we're going to push this out. We're going to publicize it like this legislative committee. They actually had no say in it, which I think is important for us to understand, because once again, you're taking the voice of the community out of things, then you're wanting them to rubber stamp it.
I'd like to also point out that when they call it a legislative committee, I want the community to look at it this way. What we want you to pay for. That's what they're asking for. They're going to push the legislators to make laws to pay for things that are in their agenda. So when they say politics aren't in schools, we shouldn't have politics in schools. This whole meeting is about a lobbying effort for things they want the taxpayers to pay for.
I think he's trying to figure out a way to raise funds.
Because Esser's not going to be around.
Esther's not going to be around. That's 100%. I mean, we lose all of that.
Right.
Commission. That's the big brown building you essentially see right behind the Capitol when you're there in Frankfurt. So you see there on the front page just the memo there from Senator Stivers, et cetera, two Senator President Stivers, just talking about the session coming up. So if you flip over, you'll see the calendar there going from January all the way through April. On that calendar, you'll see the numbers in parentheses down at the bottom of the box. That's the number of that session in the legislative session that particular day. So if you flip through, you can see where it's numbered. There's only so many days in the session, going all the way up to 60. And you can see in March there the concurrent sessions begin on Good Friday. The veto sessions begin. I'm not sure if that's a interesting coincidence there. The Good Friday is the start of the veto period. But there's essentially a 2-week veto period. So right now there's a lot of action going on down in Frankfurt with all the committees meeting, talking and working through different aspects of the priorities, the agendas of our 2 political parties, of the various parts of those parties as well. So a lot of that work's going on. So we're going to want to be sending out some information here to our employees here coming up in December to make sure that we can be asking them to contact their local legislators and do those things during that time when they're formulating some of the things that they want to be putting out on the legislative calendar. Any questions or anything else regarding the legislative calendar? So it's a long session. It's going to be a couple months. It ends in April. So it's going to be a long road working through all this. So basically 5 months of work. So you may become a little bit more well acquainted with each other in those 5 months. Okay, if there's no questions, I just want to step over and go to the next item. I gave you a different copy of our legislative priorities, just a different format, just a quick 1-page document that we can share. And that's just going to be part of what we do over a period of time, is you putting some of our priorities maybe in a different format, a different form to be able to use and consume in different ways and share with people.
So how did we finalize this? Like, how did this get the final stamp of approval?
How does that get the final?
How did it get the final stamp of approval before it went out to the entire district?
Oh, it's not gone out yet.
It went out to the staff on Thanksgiving.
Oh, yes, that's the one that went through me, through Marbury and their office. So I don't know if you have any other questions on the.
What was her question there?
How did this get the final stamp of approval before it went out?
Yeah, and what was his answer?
There wasn't one.
Right.
It didn't. He also tried to say it didn't go out, and she said, yes, it did. It went out the week of Thanksgiving to the whole staff.
Oh, that one.
Oh, I appreciate Carolyn asking that question.
Hopefully she followed through on that because that's totally disrespectful.
Well, it's a waste of all their time.
Yeah.
Why have the meetings then? If they're not going to help make decisions, then why even have the meetings?
Because the meeting was really not about the legislative agenda, but the meeting ended up being about how they push this and create lobbyists out of our staff. So you have one of Boone County's largest employers is the schools. You have the superintendent telling them what the legislative agenda is. They have a meeting and they have it with the principals, some admin, the school board, and they literally spend an hour talking about how are we going to get our staff on board to lobby the legislators. They don't use that word, but that's what they're doing. How to get them to contact their legislators and push our agenda. And they're doing this with the taxpayers funding it. All the materials they use, they're doing it on their time while they're being employed, and this meeting costs money to have everybody there. So they're using your tax dollars to lobby for an agenda that is not the same as what the community wants, because they're not even asking the community. I don't know if anybody noticed that.
Mhm.
And then just shut down Carolyn.
These school board members are voted in, just like the legislators are. So who are they going to listen to? They're going to listen to their community, meaning the legislators. Now, honestly, the school board should listen to their community too, because they're voted in also. And the problem is what they should do is sit down with the legislators and have a meeting of how they can do this together. That has not happened yet. What we like to do at the district, instead of sitting down and having a meeting with just our superintendent and maybe a couple district employees and bring in Mary Ann and Steve and John Schickel and, you know, whoever else you want to bring in that meeting. We wanted to have a public display with a moderator and be able to take pictures and post them on our website and our newsletter that probably less than 5% of the community reads. But that's what we wanted to do. And so nothing's going to get done because you don't even know if they're on the same page. Once again, you're telling them what they should go vote on when they're the ones who have to get voted on by the community, instead of them saying, well, I'm not sure that's going to work, or yes, that will work. And this goes ultimately, the people probably get tired of hearing me saying this. This goes back to Turner's leadership of not knowing how to lead a meeting. He makes $200 and something thousand, and we had to pay a moderator to run a meeting for him because he doesn't even know how to do it. And so, yeah, he's not listening to anyone. He's not getting the community on board. He's not getting the school board members on board. He's not getting the legislators on board. What he's going to do is he wants to get his little small circle on board and then try to push it out and just make everybody think it's the best thing that we need to do.
Well, yeah, because if he cultivated relationships with people, he'd have to listen to them. And he's not in the business of listening to anybody. He's there to push an agenda. So he's going to do it through force and use the communist way where I do it by force. And if you don't do what I want, I bully you and humiliate you. That's his literal tactics. It's disgusting.
Yep, 100%. He knows nothing about relational chips. I talked to him about that in our meeting. Is you have to be able to use relational chips with these legislators. To use those relational chips, what do you have to do? You have to build them. And once again, we talked about, we're close to a year of Steve being in office. It'll be January. He reached out to him last week or 2 weeks ago for him to meet. That was the first time that he tried to take him through tours of the school. Why? Because we're about to go into an important session that Mr. Turner needs him on his side. And so what does he do? He tries to call in and use those relational chips when the bank is empty.
He doesn't want to build those relationships. He receives marching orders from the state and he just regurgitates everything. And that's obvious during the school board meetings because he just reads everything. Here's your talking points, Turner, and go.
Well, just imagine if anyone out there has ever done a campaign for anything, you've ever ran for office or just anything. Imagine the reach. So this agenda comes from the K groups, KDE, KEA, KSBA, all the Kentucky education groups. They get together, collude on how they're going to push it out to the Superintendent's Association, of which there's two, there's CASA and ASA. And they push this legislative agenda. And then they get together with the schools, and the schools are the largest employers in your community. And they push it out there and they push it out to their employees, all with tax dollar money. That's just what blows my mind. Nobody's consulting the community. Nobody's consulting parents. Nobody's talking about this. And this is stuff they want us to pay for. So they want our money, but they don't want to consult us or even ask how we feel about things before they push it. And that's how big this monster is. KDE alone has over 700 employees in the state. And then you have your school boards and your local school districts are the largest employers in a lot of these counties. I mean, just think about the reach they have to indoctrinate people in their buildings in order to push legislative agendas.
The priorities there? Those are the same ones that are in the other document that I shared with you.
Would this be something that we could start sharing out with our staff? As they have conversations at faculty meetings and things like that, and talk about advocacy.
Yes, and I'd be glad to come if you want, or
Yeah,
if you're a member of our group, however you want to do that. I'd be glad to come out. My goal is to get a message out to all of our employees here within the next week. Here's some information about the upcoming legislative session. Here's some things you need to know. Here's our priorities as a school district. That type of information gets sent out. Now, what you have in your packet is some of the things that I just wanted to share as well. I made a copy of essentially our senators and our representatives with contact information. So it should be the very last document that you have. So this document just lists, here's an interactive map. If you go to that link right here, and I'll send you the electronic version of this. If you click on that link, it just brings up a map of Kentucky. And you can zoom in or click anywhere, and you click on a spot that's on the map, it'll show you here's the senator for that area, and here's the representative for that area. So anybody can simply look up who's their senator and who's the representative.
What it doesn't show you is your school board member. So I have a map that's the school districts that has all that information along with the school board members. So it's just a PDF. I'll email it to Mr. Turner and he can send it to you. As long as they know their precinct where they vote, they'll.
Once we get into the legislative session, and even before, the best ways to contact your state legislator are these three items right here. And those are really in priority order, if you will. Looking at that, the most effective way to get in contact or to on things are using that phone number, that 1-800-372-7181. That number goes straight to an operator that will ask, who are you wanting to leave a message for? What is the message you want to leave? And then they create.
First of all, they don't even teach our kids how to do this, by the way.
Right.
That's what I find interesting. These kids graduate, have no idea anything about civics or how local government works. They may know that there's 3 branches. They may know some basic stuff, but they don't know how to engage and be involved in how this process even works. So they're teaching it. And did you hear that, principal? Can we push this out through the schools yet? Oh, well, we can have meetings. We can get together and have meetings. You're paying for this, Boone County.
And that's a slip that goes directly to the representatives and the senators. And they pay close attention to those because they see those coming through. Email messages can be useful. Sometimes they may not be read in a short amount of time, much like all of us at times with email. So that's a good way to communicate, but sometimes it may not be timely. You can also call their office number. So if they are in and working in their office, you can speak to them through that 502-564-8100 number. Just whoever answers the phone, just ask them to speak to Representative so-and-so or direct you to their office. You might have to leave a message with some staff there or with their service, or they may be in their office. You might be able to speak to them. So kind of in priority order in terms of how urgent the message may be. And then here's the list of the senators and the representatives for the different areas of Boone County with their LRC email. And the next page, what I created for you was just a map off that link that I just showed you on that first page. I just zoomed into Boone County and took my pen just to write in which representatives and which senators are in which area. So with 2 senators, you can see that little black line there, right in the middle, separates essentially northern Boone County and southern Boone County. John Schickel being in the northern part of the county and Jay Williams, the southern part of the county. All the other little areas are the representative areas.
Can one of you two explain what he just talked about the last 5 minutes?
How to figure out who your senator and your House rep is.
Okay, why in the world are these people on this committee if they don't know that?
Right.
Did anybody else have that thought?
Exactly.
And why is this just being done? Once again, Why is this just being done with this committee? This committee's been around since the beginning of school. I mean, I think they were around last year. Why are we teaching committee members this now? Like what it blows my mind. Once again, back to his leadership, it blows my mind. At the last hour, we're going to teach our committee members how to do these things. Now, I know some of them probably already know that, but if you don't know how to do those things, you shouldn't be on the legislative committee. It doesn't make any sense.
Condescending.
It really is. It makes no sense to me. But once again, it goes back to who he puts on committees and what he does, and I just don't understand it. I mean, that was a waste of 5 minutes.
It was probably a directive from downstate that he had to do this. He's just executing his orders.
If we have people in that room that don't know how to do that, we have issues. They are all educators, except for our 2 school board members. And I know both of them know how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So if the rest of the people in the room do not know how to reach their legislators, well, our school district has big issues, big.
And I want to just talk a little bit about communication of sharing of priorities. What I was saying earlier is I'm going to be getting a message out to our employees here within the end of this week or early next week with some of the information that we have here, and then some general guidelines on contacting your legislators. Some of it is common sense. You know, our local legislators have their own job to do, and it doesn't need to be personal. We're going to be communicating on what we think is important for our school system to our local legislators, which they do play a great part in public education and the funding of public education. And this is a budget year cycle, so that's going to be important that we just clarify what our priorities are. So I'll be getting that out, as I said, here with you this week, early next week. So let's start talking a little bit about some other activities and some other things that, as a group, we feel we need to do, whether it's starting in December or some that are later on in the session.
I was a little surprised at the working session that we had where they acted like they not had much contact from the schools before. And I was wondering, as the building principals, should we start inviting them in before we get to the session, like in the next 3 or 4 weeks? Should we start extending invites so they can see the kind of work that we're doing to tour the schools and be in the schools?
Sure, you certainly can.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, I've been in contact with one already to go visit a school. So as a principal, certainly we can do that, to have them come in and just see what we do.
I know, I can't speak for all board members, but I'd be happy to go with them too, so.
Because I just was thinking, we have them out.
One of the principals refused to let one of our legislators into the school, by the way.
They supposedly canceled the meeting and never contacted the legislator, and the whole staff was super rude to that legislator.
This was recently?
Yes.
There was.
I'd say about a month ago, maybe.
Our political forum with Darren's social studies class, which was really good with that. But just to have a sit down, like here's our school, give them a tour, let them see and meet kind of what we're doing so they understand the quality that we're putting out. The other thing that I thought, is really, I think the school district itself is a good place to attest to this, but I think the building principals, again, really need to stress the talent pool for getting teachers is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And I don't feel like it felt like coming out of that meeting with the way they were talking, they haven't heard enough of that message from the building principals. Like, this is not something that's just on TV, it's a reality in our schools, and we have only 3 English teachers to choose from, where 7 years ago, we had like 18 English teachers to choose from. That is a problem that's getting
You
worse.
pause it there for a second.
Yep.
So there's a crisis, a teacher shortage, right? But part of the legislative agenda that they're pushing from the Chamber of Commerce is universal pre-K and full day kindergarten. Well, I'm sorry, don't you need more teachers for that? Or were you not going to hire teachers for that, I guess? You're having issues getting people to drive your buses. You're having budgeting issues. You said you can't pay them more. And that would solve your problems, actually. But you're going to add more to your school? Like, does that even make sense?
Well, it does to them. That's the problem.
Right.
It absolutely does to them. I just spoke with someone yesterday, actually, 23 years of teaching, looking to get out. One of the best teachers I think that they have at Rao, and looking to get out because of all this nonsense that they're having to do now. It's all this extra stuff that they have to do besides teaching. And we're going to keep losing good teachers. It has nothing to do with pay or nothing to do with even discipline. It has everything to do with they're asked to do so much more than they were, 5-10 years ago. And that's why teachers are getting out. Just go ask teachers. Like, go ask the everyday teacher, not a teacher that's alongside of any agenda that's being pushed. Just go ask your everyday teacher and they'll tell you exactly why they're wanting to get out.
Well, let's be specific about what this extra work is, because I had a intervention teacher tell me it's data. She's got to put all kinds of data in on the students now all day long. And she went to her principal and said, am I going to get an admin job? Because all I'm doing is admin work and inputting data. I'm supposed to be teaching these kids, but this is what my time is spent doing.
I sat down with my fourth graders teacher, parent teacher conference, and they give out a new discipline way for your kid to be graded on discipline. Well, it's Panorama is what it is. It's going to be pushed into Panorama. And when I asked the teacher if she could explain the first thing that was child wellness, that was it. The first thing was child wellness. I said, well, can you explain this to me? No clue how to explain it. Not a clue. I asked the principal, the assistant principal, can you explain this? No clue, because it's being pushed down from the district. So they push it down to these schools, and yes, it's more time. They're having to spend, think about that, 5 categories for every child now. They have to sit down. Instead of, when you meet with the parent, just saying, hey, we're having issues with your kid talking. I mean, that's really what it is. Well, your kid's a bully or whatever you want to say. Yeah, it's way more time of entering data than what they need to be doing.
So, I don't know. I mean, like I said, I think everybody can participate in the phone calls, but I was wondering, the building leads really, I think, need to direct that message hard and heavy over the next couple of months and into the session, how important it is,
Well, after the meeting we had, that's going to be the next logical approach, because I don't think we made any headway with that on our end. So I think from the school district, or from the school perspective, because that's what they really care about, is they want to know what's going on in the building.
Right, and they're also new, right? How many people, 2 of the 4 just recently elected?
This is year 2. No, those are good points, Jerry. Certainly we want to have principals inviting in. I think just looking at it from this perspective, working in education, it's hard to really communicate everything to someone that's not worked in education. All the challenges, all the difficulties, some of the struggles that you deal with just on a daily basis. It's especially for a principal position, it's the same thing. You just magnify it even more. It's amazing all the different things that you're interacting and doing, what our teachers do on a daily basis, what our classroom aides do on a daily basis. It's hard to truly wrap your hands around that unless you've done it.
But can Danta help with that? She's the principal, right? Yeah. I don't know her, but she's been to our big.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just.
She's very receptive, but she's also a majority voice.
Right.
Yeah, she understands education. For being a former educator, she does.
HR background too. It's handy.
One of the people that I thought should be front and center and inviting them out to see what they do every day was Mr. Schaefer with the bus routes and stuff that he's driving, to go and watch them drive that bus route and then go back in and do the duties of the principal. And that would be, you talk about a shadowing experience.
Well, your key person with a lot of that would be Steve Rollins, because he is on the education committee. And he's the only one, I believe, in the county that is on the education committee. But he would be the one that needs to be front and center in a lot of these, because he'll be in those committee meetings.
We want to go shadow a principal who has picked up school bus routes because we can't hire. It makes no sense. He did that on his own. He doesn't have to pick that up. They could be on a double run. Now, honestly, I have no problem with him doing the school bus run. It shows he's a hard worker and, wants to be a part of the fix. But if it's me, I'm going to ask our school board, if I'm the legislator, I'm asking the school board, why in the world can't we hire somebody to do that? Who's doing all the hiring? They don't want that because the answer would be, oh, well, we hired a principal to be over all of our assistant principal to be over all of our HR. And that's why we can't hire, is because we don't have the right person. I mean, why don't we find the school that has the best test scores in the county and say, hey, let's have them go shadow him or her and figure out what they're doing and how we can get all of these other schools to do that. We want to go shadow, and literally they pointed out that he drives a school bus.
Jacob, do you know how much he's being paid to do the bus routes? Is he being paid principal salary for the bus routes?
I've heard he's not getting paid any extra to do the bus routes.
What?
I don't know if that's true or not, but I've heard that he just stepped in because he didn't want kids waiting. That's not a knock on Matt Schaefer. I mean, once again, the fact that he's willing to do that does show his leadership. Because I'll tell you one thing, other thing that I've thought for all along is, why is Matt Turner not driving a bus? If we're that short, true leadership is some of our district employees that do have the time, they could make time to go drive a bus in the afternoon.
Well, Matt Turner's not in his office. We're busy paying all his membership fees and sending him out to California to collude with a former Podesta lobbyist on transforming education. We're paying for Matt Turner to go on all these trips and go to all these meetings. He's not in our district office, so he wouldn't be able to drive a bus route. I mean, I talked to another school board member in another county, and they said they don't allow their superintendent out of the state of Kentucky. They will not pay for anything for him to go out of the state of Kentucky. And here we are fitting the bill for all these memberships that he has. I think we found 7 or 8 just in a matter of a few months.
Yeah, and I think only 3 can be paid for legally.
Yeah, through his contract.
Right.
But we found at least 7 or 8 just in a few months that we were paying for. But then we're also paying for him to go to California. You're paying for that, people. You're paying for that with your tax money.
This is accurate, but I thought that a landing place, as far as compromise at the meeting, came about under more of the safety conversation.
That's Jenny Watson talking, just so everyone knows.
Is there any, motivation for us to continue that conversation with them?
I think out of all of what came out of that, that is probably the only point that transpired that we can build on right now. And
Jay
I think
Williams and I
there's-
spoke for quite a while after the meeting about that particular topic. And so, being a veteran of the legislature, he understands how things work and how to get some things taken care of. But he also just has that bigger, broader perspective being in that.
Now, another thing that Senator Schickel did mention was that he would gladly pick up the phone for school board members because we are elected. We do represent a constituency. I don't think we are utilized enough in this district. I don't think that we are used as the tool to work with legislators like we should be. So that we need to improve on that drastically, because right now we are the people that they would want to talk to.
Yeah, I just thought it was, how his strategy was, even if it's fully funded through the sheriff's department, that could definitely free up, at least as a starting point, monies for us to look at other priorities.
Well, and he's got the experience right now where he can find the creative ways to
It's not
find the
taking it through
funding.
C. So I just thought that was a common ground that seemed to come out of that meeting.
Seemed like layback.
Can we just point out that at that meeting where they blindsided our legislators, there was a comment made that one of the school board members did reach out to the legislator and showed his utter disdain for that legislator. So when they are reaching out, what Carolyn's talking about, apparently the communication is not very nice.
And continuing that funding, which is significant, that will
That's a big one because it aligns with workforce needs.
right. And I think that we're up to about $2 million or so from where it was before, like the last legislative session when they kind of funded that, supercharged it. So continuing that, making that a legislative priority for them is a big deal. Like that's money that can kind of be used in any of those areas, which we have it in every building.
And that's one of those things, I think, when anyone is talking with the legislators, is not only just saying, here's what we want, but also thanking them sometimes for what we've already gotten. Because you're right, 2 years ago, that was a big piece when they gave us some funding for layback. One of those grants was separate for Ignite, so we're going to be able to expand the number of students that can go to Ignite through that grant. It allowed us to do some other things with workforce pathways within our high schools as well. But yeah, having something that can be thankful for this, what's been done with certain areas, but then also there's other areas we need to talk about further as well.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I obviously wasn't at the roundtable. So which of these legislatures were present for the roundtable with?
Let's see, Rawlings was,
Schickel.
Proctor,
Jay Wood.
and Jay Wood.
So those four. Okay, and then is this what was brought to the table, like these key things?
I gave them the 4-page version, the larger version of it.
Okay, the one that you gave to us at the last meeting?
Correct.
He gave it to them.
What I feel like
He's telling them what he wants them to do.
Right.
thing that the only topic that they were able to support was the school safety and resiliency. Everything else they did not want to support.
We didn't get to
There
that.
wasn't any real conversation of we support that or don't support that. It was just, some of it was just talking about understanding. What do we mean by school safety and resiliency? Talking about our SROs, talking about our guidance counselors. There was some conversation on what these things mean and what goes into each of them. Just trying to understand what those things are.
And I think to Jerry's point, on that point, is inviting them in to show them what they talked about at that meeting would be very beneficial. How is Panorama utilized? What is Panorama?
Well, yeah.
I mean,
I've got two perspectives. I've got the parent perspective
Right.
and the administrator
Right.
perspective,
And you're looking
I
at-
don't know it either.
And you're looking
you know what I'm
at,
saying? So
yeah, you're looking
yeah.
at four people that's sitting across
Yeah.
that have no idea, which
Right.
rightly so, they wouldn't know that.
Yeah.
Stop that.
Say too.
Did you just hear what she said?
Mm-hmm.
And I just picked up on this. She said, I have the parent perspective and the administrative perspective, and I have no idea either when it comes to Panorama. That's a problem.
Right?
Literally. I don't know who that is. I need to find out who that is. But she literally said, I have the parent's perspective and the administrative's perspective, and I have no idea when it comes to that. It sounds like she's a district employee or a school administrator, and she has no clue about Panorama.
I wonder if there's a way to look up who is on that committee, that subcommittee.
I would say we could go to our website, but it's outdated. It has
True.
Julie Powell and Karen Bird on that committee.
I don't mean to continue to beat this point, but like I was really surprised at how not informed they were, right? But how open they were. We don't know what's going on, you know? Even in the part when they talked about like the salaries and other stuff, they kind of skirted around it, but it's turned to get a job, putting that conversation in front of them that like this is important to retain teachers, to keep teachers, our teaching pool is low, and you could see some of that sentiment turning, to where they started realizing and pulling back at how important it was, because the conversation switched it over to, okay, we get that this is important, but we have to figure, our challenge is figuring out a mechanism, right? But I just think I was really surprised that how not informed, but how open they were about not, like, we haven't been called by the schools, we haven't walked through the schools, we don't know these issues. We're hearing from central offices, but we're not hearing from buildings, and we're not hearing from the teachers, we're not hearing from the building Like that was pretty well stressed, and I think that's an opportunity to change this, and I think not just for legislative session. I think what we hopefully will come out of this is making that a priority. 12 months a year, whether we're in a budget session or not, to make them advocates.
Steve Rawlings is on the education committee. Did he show any interest in any of these areas? I mean, did he act as if he was knowledgeable or had advocacy for any of them?
If I want to share my 2 cents on that, he was like on, he made a couple comments that were surprising, like kids learn more in a one-room schoolhouse in 5th grade than they do now. Like that's not accurate. Like, and that just tells me how informed he is. You go to any 5th grade, I live with one. He's annoying how smart he is, right? Like, and he doesn't come from good genes either, so he's getting it from the schools. So I really was surprised that some of those. So I was a little discouraged, honestly, with some of the stuff. But even he warmed up by the end. I feel like the more that we communicate and bring them in, the more it's possible, as time allows. And I've always been, a little bit nervous about those conversations and crossing back and forth, especially with some of the stuff that we see in the national news and all that. But I think we can start creating some productive bridges,
I actually have books from a one-room schoolhouse from the early 1900s. My great-grandfather was the first superintendent of schools down in Redbird. I have some of their books. And let me tell you, I can't even do some of the math in these books. I mean, when Steve said that, we were turning out students who were more educated in one-room schoolhouses than what they're doing today. He was on point. There are schools in our county that are private that are teaching 6th graders Latin and only cursive. These kids are coming out brilliant out of these other schools. Our students can't read or write or do math, and we see it in the test scores. What was the high school? 12% proficient distinguished in social studies? And they have the nerve to act like that's not a thing. That's a thing.
And that's from the Ignite principle.
Okay, these kids are coming out of high school not knowing how to do simple things like balancing a checkbook, how to open up a credit card, or how banks work, and if you need to buy something like a house and you have a mortgage, and even like just the branches of government. They're not learning the things they need to know when they go out in the real world. They're learning math that they're never going to use again. So I think these homeschooled and private school kids are one leg up on our public school because they're learning all of this.
Well, not only do they not learn cursive, but they don't even know how to read it.
There's hope. Yeah. But he didn't seem to have, and correct me if I'm wrong with everybody else that was there, once Jay was there, he kind of led most of the discussions, and I feel like he started, Steve Rawlings started pulling back from the conversation. He talked a lot kind of at the beginning, but he doesn't like panorama, right? That was clear. There were a couple other things that he wasn't a fan of, but there seemed to be common ground with the safety issue, the career stuff he was really excited about and interested in. But he also stressed, like, I've not been invited to the schools. I don't hear from the principals. I don't hear from these. There's a lot of assumptions made about us and what we believe. I mean, I was also, you got to be careful with this. Again, being the principal at Ignite, I don't like when they call it a charter. But, they were emphasizing, like, we're not into, I kind of felt I walked out of it feeling like they're not interested in privatizing education as much as they are interested in having some more choice within schools.
That's exactly, when my conversations with Mary Ann Proctor one-on-one, that is her exact sentiment. It's not about privatizing, it's about more options and school choice in terms of, like, if you know that there's a engineering high school that's like has a great program, your kid being able to go there, or nursing, that kind of like Ignite, but spread out throughout the district. And that's where she goes with that. She doesn't care if it's private, she just wants school choice. So she's been very clear with that with me.
And Jay mentioned that, I think, too. He went into that in detail, and Steve jumped on that. So that was, I mean, again, I think we all deal with that. We all, as educators, like, what's the best programs to have for kids that are available? We all want the best. And figure out a way to effectively and efficiently do that programs is a good conversation to have. But I don't know, I got more, I honestly came away with a little bit more positive on actionable items that we can take than I would have thought otherwise. I thought it was, it's always nerve-wracking when you get together. Everything's going to start off a little bit walking out of it. I felt like there's like we as educators in this district, if we can have a really strong call to action with our principals, can make a lot of good, I felt, in the next 2 to 3 months. It's weird that I feel optimistic, because that's not really not my game. But,
I would add on to that because I spoke at length with Jay Williams in the parking lot afterwards. Shut up. We need to talk about diversity and what diversity means, because he kept talking about diversity and how do you teach 30 kids who are diverse in one classroom. And I told him how you do it. You get to know the kid and how the kid learns, and you're not teaching. Someone said about that 40% in the middle. I can't remember who said that. Maybe he said that in the parking lot, that we don't teach the kids here, we don't teach the kids here, we teach that 40%, and that's just not true. I mean, go into any classroom in this district, and you teach to 100% of the kids all the time. And if they're, depending upon where they are, I mean, you're teaching a diverse crowd every day. He kept saying that diversity of learning or whatever you want to say it is. And I think that's another place where they don't understand. The people that were at the table, we were talking about 4 people who do not have kids in public education.
And 2 of them don't have kids.
2 of them don't have kids, and the other 2 homeschool their kids. And so, what we do is a mystery because they've not seen what we do.
Well, I think that's when we get them into the schools. One other thing that they're really hung up on.
What Jay was saying is diversity in education. He was talking about having different routes to educate children, including a classical education. That's what he was talking about. And if they say that they don't know what we do, we can see your test scores. Mm-hmm. We have data to tell us what's working and what's not. And not only that, but our legislators that we have now actually communicate with their constituents. So they know what's going on. I mean, Jesse was just complaining at a school board meeting that there were 6 parents he talked to that were mad because they were having to get tutoring for their kids. You know why? Because the teacher was assigning videos and Chromebook work to do math, and it wasn't working. So then they stayed after school to get the school's tutoring, and it was, again, videos and on the Chromebook, and they still weren't learning. So then the parents had to pay for a tutor to actually teach their kids math. So something's not working. Are they fixing that?
Well, no, because they're all on Chromebooks. Still, some kids are not learning on the Chromebook.
And I think it's funny they talk about that they don't have kids. So you can't know anything about education if you don't have kids. Mary Ann's a speech pathologist. I mean, go look at what she had to do to get that behind her name. I mean, it's not like we're talking about uneducated people, but we like to throw that around. Oh, well, they don't have kids. They must not know what we're talking about because they don't have kids. And it's like, what does that have to do with anything? You don't think they know what's going on in our schools because they don't have kids?
Right. And then Schickel drove a school bus for how many years? So he was involved.
Ignorance. It really is ignorance.
Yeah.
So what should we say now? Well, Karen Bird doesn't really know what's going on in our schools because she doesn't have kids in our schools now. Because I will tell you this, what's going on in our schools now is different than what was going on in our schools 10 years ago. And since we've had Mr. Turner as our superintendent, things have changed drastically even since he's taken over. Let's not act like having kids is this, all be all, and because you have kids in the district that you know everything. And if you don't have kids, then you don't know anything. Like that's ignorant to me.
Well, they use that as a qualifier. When I talked to them about when they implemented Summit, which was the test ground for the Chromebooks, by the way, When I was talking to some teachers, administrators about how upset I was that they were using Summit, it wasn't working, and there were studies already done that kids don't learn on devices. They told me that I had no say because I don't have a master's degree in education. So what I was seeing in my own child and hearing from parents with their own kids who were actually experiencing this didn't matter because I don't have a master's degree in education. They will always find qualifiers to make excuse is why you don't have a voice. You don't get a voice for this reason. Again, it's communism. They are freaking practicing Mao's China playbook. I'm so sick of them.
Well,
And they're so dense, you can't get through to them.
Matt Turner doesn't listen to you if he doesn't agree with you. I have the same degree as Matt Turner. I have my master's in education. In fact, I don't even know if his master's is in leadership. Mine is leadership of education. He doesn't listen to me. He because I don't agree with him, because I will not push his agendas. So he doesn't listen to me. They just don't listen. They know nothing about, not all of them. Not all of them are that way. Dr. Detweiler listens. I've called him about a couple things and he will get things pushed into play. But Matt Turner is not that way.
Goal on, was it reading? Was it reading?
Yeah, they were mentioning some statistic that was on one of our handouts at the board meeting.
Yeah, they're hung up on that particularly right now. So some better explanation in terms of what that means and what that looks like. So some follow-up from maybe LSS would probably go a long way, like maybe inviting them to LSS and
State by the state goal.
I talked about that too.
yeah.
You know, it's specifically, I mentioned a kid who I had an AP who came in, he earned a 2 in AP, and that was a huge leap because he went from maybe a 0, probably a 1 to a 2, and he didn't get college credit for that, but he came a long way in getting to a 2. And you know, 46 might be a huge number. They just need to know what that number means. Because if you're coming from a 20, 46 is good. If you're coming from 45, it's not. They see that number and they don't have any context.
I will say there is a little bit I know about some of the folks that are behind some of their grassroots organizations that represent the politicians that are at the table. And I do know reading is a big issue amongst some of their grassroots supporters, right? So if you look at some of the places and people that they're associated with that get back behind them and fund them, there's a lot of other reading initiatives that they push. And not to pander to them, but that would be another place for them to see what we're trying to do more with reading, right? Like, I think that is a key issue. Like, if there's anything academic, first I would say the career stuff rings, and the second one really is reading at an early level. That they honestly, truly care about that, and I think the groups that are behind them support it. So any of those kind of groups that can be created.
Well, whenever they bring it up, whenever I'm having discussions, it does turn to reading, and I always talk about you, Dr. Watson.
What did he say? He didn't want to do what to them? I don't want to pander. What are they wanting the legislators to do to them? You know what I'm saying? Like it's a double standard that they don't want to give them what they want. They want the legislators to give them what they want. And that's straight from Mr. Turner's leadership. No give and take. Here's the interesting, I told him this in a meeting last week. I don't want to move my money around. I want you to move the state's money around to give us more money. But I don't want to move my money around in my buckets that I have to show you that I'm willing to sacrifice things to get more money. I just want you to move your buckets of money around to give me more money.
Just your complete 180 turnaround in terms of how we've been teaching and explaining that we're addressing that issue in the district. So the stuff that they talk about is being addressed, but you're not going to see the fruit from that for at least a couple more years.
Training 3,000 teachers.
Yeah.
How to unlearn and relearn.
But that's why I think if we can get them into LSS,
Yeah, absolutely.
to see what you're doing and to let you see your passion and your office with all of your numbers.
Oh, yeah.
It's, you know, so it's, but yeah, if they understand that, they see what you're doing and putting into it, I think that makes a huge difference. But that's part of the relationship building.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's, you know, we can't avoid that piece, and they have to be invited in and they have to see.
Yeah. And Kelly, back to your point, I think the word diversity that he kept using and how we think of diversity is two very, very different things. I think Jay Williams was talking about diversity in options for students, that we need to diversify. That's the word he kept using. We need to diversify options for students, which makes me think of pathways versus diversity in
Right.
terms of who's sitting in front of us every day.
Right.
That you're right, they have no real understanding of who our district, who we serve
Right.
in our district.
I also don't think that they understand, when he was talking, we talked about, I just lost the name of it, memorization of math tables. And I told him if I had learned a different way, I could do math today.
Yes.
And it's, I had to learn by rote. And he asked me a history question, got it, because I can memorize that. I can't do math. Had I learned the process, I'd be a different person.
Conceptual.
But I don't think they understand that we're hitting those kids, every one of them, how they learn.
I think one thing we've got to be careful with is we keep saying that they don't understand. They do understand a lot, but I think their perspective is just different. And so we can't approach that mentality when we're building relationships with them, because we've got to be willing to listen to what they're having to say, because they're going to bring some stuff to the table that might make us better. Yeah.
Leader and me.
A couple other comments that were made, that's me educating them on the behavior. Like sometimes I feel like when you talk and you listen to them, they think like that things are crazy and out of hand in our schools, and they just aren't, right? Like I went to a private Catholic school, and I would take the behavior in our high schools any day over some of the classmates that I was in, right? Like and the way the teachers are treated with respect. I mean, again, I can't say enough for getting them into the schools, because that is one huge misconception that I think they have. Now, do we have pockets where there's issues? Absolutely, right? But 95% of what's happening in our schools on a day-to-day basis in the classrooms that we're in is fantastic.
Well, they suffer from the same thing we do at district office. The calls we get every day are about poor behavior. Nobody ever calls us and says, wow, the behavior in the school is wonderful.
Right.
They get the same calls. So you're right, we have to change that perception for sure.
And I think that's kind of that would be super important for them to see, because some people just have this idea that, you know, it looks like lean on me still, you know, with Morgan Freeman in our schools, and it doesn't. Our schools are great places for kids to go and learn.
Well, especially this year, the discipline issues have gone down so far.
Yeah.
That's been nice.
Yep.
It seems like everything that we're talking about goes back to getting them into the building and building those relationships with the teachers and the educators. And I really believe LSS.
I think, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, I think some of the principals share a trepidation. I think you mentioned that earlier, for inviting them in. So I think we need to provide some sort of structure for the principals so that they feel confident.
I think so.
Use us.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Honestly, I think Dr. Poe, right? I remember the first couple of times that because in other districts there was a couple places where I encouraged to try and bring someone in. I remember when I first did it, I got to sit down, like, we don't do that here. If someone's coming in your building, you let them know, you let this, we want everything monitored, you know. And I love Dr. Poe, but that was just kind of, he wanted the messaging to them just from him. If they were going to come through the building, he wanted to have that tour and that piece.
He wanted to at least be there.
Yeah, in all honesty, I mean, quite frankly, until we started doing this, I proposed it tonight, I didn't feel comfortable bringing them in, just with the phone call, you know, other than an academic exercise like Darren's work, which you guys are all aware of. We informed you that we're doing it.
You know, that's all, as superintendent, that's all I would ask. Just make me aware.
Yeah.
Those types of things.
And
Certainly would
engage.
encourage it.
Why does Matt Turner need to be aware when a community member who represents our state is at a school? He doesn't know everything else that's going on in our district. Why does he want to know that?
Well, if he was out and about in the district, he would know, but he's not.
Well, I want to bring up something about what they were saying about behaviors. Carolyn said that the behavior issues were getting better. I don't know what better is considered, because just about 6 months ago, the school board was saying the behaviors were the worst they've ever seen, that they were seeing things they've never seen coming out of these kids and things happening. And I personally know teachers who say that some of the worst students, we're not making reports on them. They have to do 3 incidents before we make 1 report because they want to hide the fact that there's so many issues. So if we're hiding the fact that there's so many issues, we're not addressing those. It's like when you give this education realm a metric that's supposed to be telling you what's going on, the numbers are supposed to tell a story. But if they're so busy finagling what those numbers look like to make themselves look good, we're not getting factual data and we're not getting data to make ourselves any better.
No, and that's what they're doing. They changed the discipline chart to
Right.
where they don't have to write up as many students. That's what they wanted. I mean, I said in a meeting with the discipline committee. And one of the things that came out of it is, why are we sending kids? Why are we writing and suspending and doing this for kids that are vaping? Like, it's just vape. Chris Brock's comment was, well, we need to adapt to the world these days. We haven't adapted. And it's just a vape. Well, what they don't understand, and I mean, maybe they know this and they just want to throw a blind eye to it. Maybe they don't know. Most of these vapes that these kids are doing in school have THC. These kids are sitting around high as a kite in class. I mean, my 7th grader tells me that. Oh, Dad, people vape all the time in the bathrooms. Well, if they think they're just vapes, then, I mean, they're just being naive to it.
Well, and imagine being a kid that you're going to school and getting high. And I'm thinking, why would you do that? You would do that if you're not being academically challenged. If you're going in classrooms and you're told just to watch a video and then plug in your assignment on your Chromebook, like, this is awful.
If there's a story that you want us to cover, contact us at jillandstacy@protonmail.com. And you can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, aka X, Rumble, BitChute, and YouTube. Subscribe and like.